So dear colleagues, welcome back. I hope you have enjoyed your lunch and hope you are ready for the first session, and that is Pedagogy in Virtual Environment. The interest for this session and for the whole conference was very big, and today in the morning a lot of questions have been raised about the teachers, the role of the teachers, the collaboration. So I hope that this session will also respond to some of these questions that have been raised in questions and answers option. I remind you also that throughout the session you can write your questions in questions and answers, and we will try to take them on board as many as possible as the time will allow. In this session, we have two presentations and a panel. And first of all, I would like to remind you that, as it has already been highlighted, the Council conclusions on European teachers and trainers for the future are essential and very important for all types of education and training. Teachers and trainers are really indispensable driving force of education and training, and so far teachers have done amazing work in this COVID situation. The crisis caused by the COVID-19 virus pandemic suddenly moved the entire educational process into the online and virtual environment. So we want to discuss how have teachers adapted to the new situation, what support have they recognized that they need so they could meet the challenges of the new normal, and what can we help to give them support. The competencies of the teachers for 2030 include most definitely the competencies for the new normal. So let us start with an overview from the European perspective by Hannah Grainger Clemson. Hannah works for the European Commission as Schools Policy Officer and the coordinator of the ET 2020 Working Group Schools. She has worked as a teacher, including mentoring new teachers. Then she moved to university-based education research and teacher education before working in policy development. She is currently also involved in the research on blended learning, so she will share valuable information on that matter too. So Hannah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Katarina, and thank you to all of the organisers for inviting me to speak today. Just the usual check to see that you can actually see the presentation slides.
Yes, we can see the slides.
Wonderful. So what I'm actually going to do first is I'm going to come out of the presentation, because what I want to do is to share a few links with you that you might actually find useful to look at during the presentation, during the panel, or later. So I'm actually I'll go to the normal question and answer, because I think that's where most people can actually see that. And if I post that there, I think someone can then give permission for that to be shared with all of the organisers. So that should work. If that's appeared, then I'll go back to the presentation. What I'm going to focus on is work that we've been doing to support policy development, in particular through the ET 2020 Working Group Schools, which is made up of representatives of ministries of education and stakeholder organisations from across Europe. The work that we've been doing has focused particularly on supporting school self-evaluation and development, and also supporting teacher and school leader careers. Now, this is 2 years of work on two different topics. I can't present all of it right now, which is why I encourage you to have a look at that work. But what I will say is that, importantly, that really does have the learner at the centre. You know, it's the ultimate goal of why we've been looking at this. And so, even though we've been focusing on those two things, you know, the learner is never far from our minds, and about creating meaningful learning experiences for those learners. We were going to give everyone a gift. This was going to be a little bit of a surprise from the generous Croatian hosts. I'm not going to tell you why we were going to give you a cube. It was not going to be made out of paper, it was going to be made out of another material. But I'm going to let you guess maybe by the end of the presentation why we wanted to do that. And here are some instructions in the spirit of distance learning and in the spirit of practical hands-on learning. We encourage you to actually create your own. So, bit of a change of mood. This is or was for us something that we talked about right from the start when we were talking about teacher and school leader careers. It is the challenge of this rather sad, depressing image of a single lonely road as a school education career. And we quickly recognised for us some other 3 R's. I know that Pasi Solberg introduced some 3 R's to us this morning, but for us the main challenges for careers are the challenge of recruitment, the challenge of retention, so that's keeping teachers and school leaders actually working within the system, but also regeneration, that idea that we need teachers and school leaders to help each other and to work with each other to explore new ways of being and new ways of developing pedagogy and new ways of existing as a community. A key concept that I wanted to share with you from the working group is this understanding about, for us, how career progression and professional development happens. For us, we identified it being as a critical combination of motivation, ability or competence, and opportunity. Now, this is the idea that a teacher, someone working within school education, needs to be motivated to develop their own competence and to seek out new opportunities. In order to develop effectively their competences, they need the opportunities to put them into practice. And also the opportunity can act as something very motivational for teachers. So this is a really important point that we wanted to share. There are also certain conditions that go with that, or perhaps further challenges for policymakers and leaders to address, which includes obviously that intrinsic motivation, the idea of talent and competence, that we have aspirations for all teachers for what they should be able to do, but we should recognise that they have their individual talents, that there should be diverse opportunities for development, and that this came up this morning, the sense of professional identity is just so important. That understanding that teachers are a community, that there is part of their professional being that should be about developing and sharing practice. And also the school climate, the working conditions and so on, the respect that is given to the profession is equally important. Moving on then, this is the other key point that we wanted to share about careers, that actually there are 6 ways to understand possible career paths, that it isn't just your traditional moving upwards, although that is fine, to become a teacher, to become a school leader, but perhaps you might as a teacher become more of an expert, so that's sort of moving up and along, expanding your horizons within your particular area of expertise. Moving sideways, taking on different roles within your school community, perhaps an added responsibility there, or a particular specialist area such as digital tools coordinator perhaps. Changing context, moving from primary, secondary and so on. Adding layers, perhaps being within a school and maybe acting as an advisor to other schools or regionally or even nationally. And then actually what was my career path is that I actually came into teaching as a second career. So for me, I'm the one who sort of came in a bit later and then sort of moved slightly to the fringes of school education and then a bit back in again and then out again. So there are all these different possibilities. A key point with all of this, how? Developing diverse pedagogical practice, competencies and career paths needs structured dialogue and support. I was tempted to put in here an image of an artificial intelligence sort of robot. That's quite a popular image these days to put in when we talk about teaching and the future of school education. But I think it's really important that we remember that we're dealing with humans here. This image could be a teacher with their mentor. It could be a school head sitting with an inspector. It could be an adult learner and another teacher. You know, it's just this idea of dialogue and support being so important to progression. How does this then work in terms of the system? I think if we were to have a message that drew together all of the ideas about school development and teacher development and where we're going in the future, it would be this: that guidance and dialogue with competent inspectors, authorities, educators, teachers and so on can take care of all schools, of all teachers and school leaders and all learners. But there's something really important that needs to happen in the middle of all of that. That we need to take care of the individuals, that we need to better support individual schools because they're working in unique contexts with unique communities. And so that is where particularly that level of external advice and education authorities can help take care of individual schools as well as all schools through that guidance and dialogue. That, of course, as I said about career progression, taking care of the individual teacher and school leader within the whole profession. And then, of course, I think we understand that this is true at the level of individual pupils. There's been talk this morning about personalised learning, about learner development plans, about shifts in terms of curricular and assessment, thinking about the needs of individual pupils whilst also taking care of all learners, which requires flexibility, diversity and appropriate tools. And of course, if we look across the middle, which is what we're talking about in this panel, particularly to do with teachers and their development, this idea of using professional development plans and framework and dialogue to help those individuals. And to finish off, I just wanted to put that in a little bit of context. As was also mentioned this morning, we have published blended learning in school education guidelines for the start of the next academic year, thinking about blended learning as a combination of in-school and distance learning. Now, distance learning can include online learning, but it's not exclusively online learning. We worked on this document a little bit with members of a distance learning network, so more representatives of member state ministries, and we identified 8 areas in which there are key considerations for setting up blended learning models and developing those as we go along. And you'll see actually at the bottom one that I have not highlighted, but you might look at is learner assessment. But I just wanted to draw your attention to the school leadership and the role of the teachers. There is so much to take into consideration, and that's something that we might talk about in the panel and that you might look at in detail if you have a look at the publication. So there are many things to take into consideration. What does this mean in practice? I think for us, we would say that if you put all of that together, finding your own role as a teacher, you know, your own path is going to be perhaps even more important now. That this is an example from the Digital Competence Framework for Educators. And when we were developing this, we really wanted to stress that you don't have to be an expert at everything. I think that would send out the wrong message, but that actually reflecting on your own role teachers reflecting on their own role within a school, they might be a newcomer to using digital tools, but they might actually be an expert with communicating with parents. So this might actually inform dialogue and the setting of the school leadership in the next academic year, and it will obviously also help, we think, with professional identity, that each teacher can actually and school leader can think, right, who do I want to be within my school? What can I offer? What do I need to achieve my own goals? And then if the school then helps to put that together, you then should have hopefully an effective community and team that can work together positively in the future. So then just to finish off, it just gives you an idea of some of the key stakeholders involved, that school heads in particular, we think deserve attention. This is, they're dealing with the crisis management and a lot of change. The role of mentors and leaders in terms of providing career guidance combined with school strategic planning and obviously for teachers, tailored and flexible professional development opportunities and the opportunities to take different roles. Any guesses? That's all I was going to say as an introduction. This is what we were hoping to offer you, is that actually if you get to make your cube, you could then have a go. If you draw the 6 career paths on the side of it, that might be a fun tool to work with, to think about where you might want to go or where you are and where you might go next. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the panel discussion and your questions.
Anna, thank you very much for this inspirative presentation. We will definitely take on board some of the points that you have made in your presentation, and it has to do with flexibility that the teachers need to have, the role of the teachers, of course, the importance of stakeholders, as you mentioned, the mentors, the leaders, the school heads. So I hope that the audience will enjoy our panel later on. And before that, since the whole conference is dedicated to the teachers, we are very proud that we have one teacher among us to give the presentation. So this is Elvisa Sekulić, who is a teacher in Croatia, and she will give us an overview of teaching and leading a class of students in an online environment and how she met the challenges which have risen in her everyday work. Elvisa is also a member of the working group for mathematics curriculum within the comprehensive curricular reform in Croatia, and she also received an award given to the best teachers in 2019. She is engaged in promoting work with digital tools and the purposeful use of ICT in everyday teaching. So Elvisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi to everyone. My name is Elvisa Sekulić and I'm a math teacher in Zorka Sever Elementary School, Popovača, Croatia. Do you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see it and we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. When I started working, all I had was a green board. And after years of work and involvement in various education and projects, I came to realize that all these projects was building my career, and I was building myself as a teacher. And I came to realize that each class, each group, and each student should be approached individually, and that there's no universal method and for each teacher. And after years of training and investigating how or what teacher could I be, I was able to find my strength and find out that my role as a teacher is very important. And then came the COVID-19 pandemic, which suddenly moved our educational process to virtual environment. Technology is a very big part of today's world, and I think it needs to be present in school because we have to keep up with present times. That encouraged me on my journey to present technology to my students as much as possible. But I think that the digital tools are just another tool that teachers use. It becomes useful only in the hands of creative teacher. When I was preparing for this panel, I wondered what could I, as a teacher in Croatia, could show to you. And then I realized that the best thing to show you is my students' response on online teaching. So last week, I asked my 8th graders, age 14 and 15, how they felt during online class. And as you can see, the results, positive emotion mainly prevail. And that is indication to me that regardless of the situation and complexity of that situation we find ourselves in, online math class are still experienced in positive light. My 8th graders are kids that didn't have problem to work online, because those are kids who eat and sleeps with their cell phones. But they needed to be more encouraged, more motivated, and I had to remind them more often to their work responsibilities. They were more based on the grade they would achieve from some activity. I also asked my 5th graders, those are students 10, 11 years old, how they felt during online class. And you can see their responses. They responded very positive, even more so than my 8th grade students. Working with 5th graders, I had to focus more on formative assessment and evaluation, and also monitoring, because I had to constantly giving them feedback, and I had to encourage them and give them recognition, because that all increased their motivation. They were more based on my feedback, my positive feedback, and they worked on correcting their mistakes. 5th graders were more motivated to work, and they often gave their honest opinion about some activities, whether they like it or not. Last but probably most importantly, I also asked my colleagues from my school how they felt during distance learning. And here you can see that my colleagues were optimistic, creative, and motivated, but also frustrated and mixed up. Why is that? Well, I believe that most of my colleagues gave their best. We were all burdened with our own worries, and despite that, we took care to do our job well, with a lot of effort, empathy, and professionalism. For me as a teacher, a math teacher, the most important thing during distance learning was positive communication and feedback from our students, parents, and my colleagues. That was extremely important for me. And I think that during distance learning, I needed my collegial help and their support the most. Also, we had a correlation of subjects, and we conduct extracurricular activities with our students, like school project days, like a Day of Europe, Father's Day. We had guidelines given by our professional service from our school and our ministry from on the class management and assessment, and that greatly affect my work through distance learning. When pandemic came and when schools shut down, no one had exact answer on how to teach students. And everyone I know, my colleagues from my school and the other schools, was trying various new methods, new digital tools and other means how to make online class more adapt to present times. And I think all the training I was in which I participated slowly prepared me for what I experienced in 2020. I realized I had to change ways of working in classroom in order to maintain freshness in online class and I realized that I, as a teacher, I'm no longer a primary transmitter of knowledge, and that I have to adapt to the situation and spend more time figuring out how to motivate my students to learn and to solve math problems. And here are some examples of that journey. Participating in experimental programs of the School of Life has allowed me to work in a different way than before. And in order, I was able to see pros and cons of both methods. And although it didn't seem like that in the beginning, students who had worked with digital tools and technology more before had slightly better results in the final tests. I also knew that I had to focus on not only on transferring knowledge, but for creating tasks, challenging tasks that will be interesting and accessible to my students. Tasks in which they will use technology, but also build models, measure surfaces, evaluate results, all for the purpose of applying math in everyday life. Motivating today's students is a challenge that I had to face with on the daily basis. I have seen that my students needed accessibility at all times of the day. That required and needed for me to give additional sacrifice and engagement, but I couldn't help not to answer my students' questions and not to answer some question about some assignment or some student question. And I often was troubled, and I couldn't separate my private life from my business life. I also wanted to achieve that my students learn how to learn, and I wondered how to raise their level of self-confidence so that they could use and apply math in everyday situation. By introducing technology in teaching of math, I wanted to enable my students to develop digital literacy and other computer skills. And most important thing was I often gave my students positive reactions and praise. I highlighted the best works and commented with them on activities we were solving, because I noticed that increases their motivation. Maybe the hardest part of my job during online teaching is to be a class teacher of 8th graders. Why? Because I had to hold a class lesson. I had to monitor their activity on other subjects. I had to encourage them to choose the right future profession. I had to motivate them to work. I had to call their parents at whenever, and that all are challenges I had encountered. I tried to maintain that circle through video conferencing and chats. We had this virtual wall of where we shared and our favorite books and songs, and I did it to relieve my students of and with some activities that has no direct connection to school. I also tried to maintain the continuity of class hours by changing some activities. And I believe that for my students, this online experience will be priceless to them during their future schooling and for any future job. And through frequent communication with parents, I try to maintain the circle of connections between parents, students, and myself. And in order to inform parents on every achievements of their children and possible problems during online class. And also I was conducting surveys with my students and parents, all in conducting positive feedback from both students and parents. And on Friday, I finished my class with these simple words. And I wish them luck and success. And I hope that they will come out from elementary school ready for everything that awaits them in the future. And thank you for calling me to join this panel.
Thank you very much, Elvisa. I believe that your presentation reflects the situation of many of teachers who are among us. And I can see that quite a few of them have also shared positive thoughts in the questions and answers box. So now I would like to introduce my two other distinguished panelists. After we have heard the European perspective, we have heard the perspective of a teacher in Croatia. And now I would like to introduce my other panelist, that is Lilia Maria Vicente, and also Paivi Nilivaara from Finland. So welcome to this panel. Anna, can you please also join us with your camera? So thank you very much. And now I would like to introduce Lilia, who works as a team coordinator at the Ministry of Education in Portugal. She is a member of Working Group on Schools at the European Commission, and she also holds a Master in Educational Sciences. So Lilia, can you share with us a brief overview of the situation on distance learning in Portugal, as we have heard throughout the morning and now from Elvisa's presentation? The COVID-19 pandemic has put a big challenge on all.
Certainly. Are you hearing me well?
Yes, we can hear
Okay.
you. There is a slight echo, but I think we can manage.
Okay, I'd like to congratulate the colleagues from Croatia for the excellent organization of this conference and thank them for having invited me to join this panel representing Portugal. Then I'd like to start by saying that never before the beginning of this crisis had we seen entire education systems go virtual overnight, joining parents, teachers and students in an amazing collaborative work. Despite the guidelines issued by our Ministry of Education together with the national health authorities, the fact was that hundreds of school clusters nationwide, thousands of teachers and more than 2 million students and their parents have tackled the problem according to their organizational reality and to their professional, family and personal constraints. To start with, we consider that the strategy that the changes that schools and teachers were forced to implement during the pandemic are for most part imprecisely labeled as distance learning, because this would have implied the design of a specific and new educational approach in which the domains of technology, pedagogy and curricular subject contents would have to be merged in order to provide an all new and integrated way of delivering teaching that would assure that students could effectively continue to learn, though in an entirely different setting. And indeed, some schools did it. Still, given the time and the constraints to which the system was forced to respond as a matter of urgency, what most teachers and schools actually did was a mere sort of acclimatization of the dominant pedagogical model to the new environment in which teaching would have to be delivered. Although using all the technological means at disposal, there was not a real makeover of the teaching process, of the teaching materials, and as well as many assessment criteria. And that is why we believe it is prudent to call this new form of schooling as remote emergency learning, at least in what concerns the Portuguese situation. Given this overall context, I decided to organize my presentation according to the actors that were crucial in all this process, referring each one and highlighting their role. First, I would like to underline the guidelines set by the Ministry of Education and made known to all school clusters. By the end of March, a roadmap titled 8 Guiding Principles for Implementing Distance Teaching at School Level was issued, setting the sections and the distance teaching plan that every school cluster was required to prepare and submit, and which were the management and leadership strategies, the flow of information and communication paths, the distance teaching model to be implemented, and the monitoring and assessment procedures. Being aware that many students would not have access to either internet or hardware equipment, the Ministry of Education also went back to an ancient model of distance teaching in which the public TV channels started to deliver classes mainly to primary and lower secondary education. In some underprivileged neighborhoods, the municipalities guaranteed the distribution of computers, laptops, or similar equipment to low-income families. In second place, I would like to highlight the importance of school principals. The current situation reinforces the importance of leadership practices reflecting open forms of communication, creativity, and autonomy. The current situation demands for a socially constructed leadership that shares decisions and promotes the quality of education. In third place, I would like to refer that in order to deliver effective distance learning, teachers were compelled to activate many of their hidden skills, such as flexibility, creativity, collaborative work, digital skills, and above all, communication and social and emotional skills. A last word to comment on what still needs to be done to ensure quality on pedagogical work in distance learning. It is our perception that all actors involved in the educational process will approach it differently from now on. First of all, policymakers, who will have to consider moments of significant disruption in their decisions. Then school principals, who will need to equip their schools with digital platforms capable of responding to the day-to-day operation of school, regardless of having to respond to an emergency. And they will have to promote distributed leadership and make sure that all their teachers are given the opportunity to engage in their professional development. Then teachers, as they will never see their classroom, their students' parents, their role as educators with the same eyes again. Furthermore, they have become bolder and wiser in searching for what they need to overcome any difficulty. Also parents, as they are now more aware of what it takes to be a teacher and a school principal and of how important their role is in supporting their children. And last but not least, students, who after having experienced other teaching environments will probably expect their teachers to implement new teaching strategies and different assessment criteria. Finally, I would like to say that words such as inclusion, well-being, network, and collaborative work have never meant so much as they do now, and they have to be a meaningful part of the vocabulary of education systems, together with the need to create online learning communities. If there was ever a time to try new things, test ideas and innovate, the time is now. And it is an imperative that we carry these lessons onwards as we prepare our students and educators to what disruptions may come in education and in life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lilia, for highlighting what actually the teachers have undergone, but not just the teachers, but all stakeholders, and for mentioning the students, the parents, the policymakers, the school leaders. We all believe and we are aware that their cooperation and communication is extremely important. And now I would like to ask my next panelist, Paivi, who is an educational consultant, and you specialize, Paivi, on curriculum development, pedagogy and teacher training, so your input will be valuable for us. You are also an internationally recognized expert in curriculum development and have supported curriculum reforms across Europe and around the world, among others in Finland, Croatia, South Africa and the others. And we all know that Finland is constantly changing and working on development of the education system and teacher training. So can you share with us the thoughts that the teachers have had in Finland now? What were the challenges that they have met now due to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you. Good afternoon and greetings from sunny Finland this time. I think it's very nice to, in a way, very nice to hear that the same phenomena seems to be around Europe, because the experiences we have heard today, they are pretty much what we have had in Finland also. Our schools were closed in basic education almost 2 months. And I think what I found when talking with teachers, that this has been an extremely important learning experience for them. I mean, it's a real learning at work, really. So, and according to research that will be released this week, the teachers said that they have their digital skills have developed during this spring. I think 94% of the teachers mentioned that the skills have enhanced. And also almost 70% of the teachers mentioned that they will change their way of teaching, even in face-to-face teaching, which is quite interesting result and important. So this has opened their eyes in a way. What we have seen here in Finland is extremely interesting networking of teachers. We have so many channels and groups in social media like Facebook and Twitter and everywhere, where teachers are sharing their ideas, they're sharing their materials, and what is, I think, important, they are asking for advice from their colleagues, which is not very typical for teachers, as you may experience also in other countries. So I think it's a good way to learn. It's really peer learning, I would say. Here in Finland, the teachers' autonomy is extensive in applying the curriculum, and it also means a lot of responsibility. It's of course, in this kind of situation, it brings a lot of flexibility when organizing the distance learning, but also on the other hand, it's very time consuming and it can be hard for teachers, and that's one of the experiences we have had. So quite many of teachers report that they are a bit stressed, or even more stressed than a bit. So in this situation, the national authorities and the municipalities who are responsible of the schools, they have provided a lot of support and advice for schools and teachers, more than in general. So, and that has been priced in schools as well. But about the future, the challenges that teachers have met, they are not related to digital tools. They are quite easily adopted. But I think the most important question is how to meet the individual needs of the students. That's a question the teachers raise in our discussions quite often. And also the other thing is how to promote the sense of belonging and how to meet the emotional needs of the students in this online learning. So, and also how to enhance interaction and collaboration between the students when they are alone at home. So these are maybe the questions that we have to solve in the future, and also to train our teachers for this. And I'm happy to discuss with you on these topics in the panel.
Thank you very much, and thank you for raising the issue of collaboration and motivation of students and support as well. So perhaps Elvisa, who is a teacher, can share with us which support did she find most needed during this COVID period?
Well, we had online staff meetings. That was very helpful for me, and we conduct surveys for parents and our students. We conduct surveys through class and like a teacher of math, and in that way I found what my students need. If they need more video conferencing, if they need more interactive activities, if they need more homework, and the results were very interesting. And on our staff meetings, we talked about those results, and as a school, we how to say, decided on which way we will go from that meeting. And from meeting to meeting, we decided different areas that we will develop with our students.
Thank you very much. This input of the school acting as a whole community is very important. And now, Hannah, you have mentioned that the European Commission has developed a document on blended learning, so we are all preparing for autumn, and we believe that most likely it's going to be a kind of blended learning. Can you share with us which stakeholders have been identified as the most important to give support to the teachers to start the new academic and school year successfully?
Wow. Can you pick one who is the most supportive? I think the quick answer to that is that I think everybody in the community is really important. I was glad that Andreas Schleicher mentioned this morning leadership, actually, and not just leaders in terms of the singular school head. I think that would be, we think, with the research that and the work we've been doing for the last 2 years, but also thinking about blended learning and organisation change, putting everything on the school head, I think is not going to be helpful. It's just going to make them more stressed and more anxious. And they've already worked so hard, I know, to come up with Plan A, Plan B, Plan C for September themselves. We talk about school leadership in terms of having a shared vision. And I think that in terms of a concept could help a management team then support their staff as a whole. So I think that would be for us the core around, you know, with the school in terms of supporting the teachers in their business of teaching, but also in terms of being a teacher, which is more than just teaching, of course, which is about, as we've talked about all day, about looking after your pupils and how they're feeling and all of these kinds of things. I think there is obviously also the recognition of supporting the parent to support the learner, but also working with parents, so that the parent, if you're working with parents in dialogue, sharing practice, asking what their needs are together, you know, that they can then give, I suppose, in a way back to the teaching staff in terms of identifying issues or stating sort of particular preferences, you know, having a voice themselves. It really, I think it was the French representative in the panel just before lunch who said, he said something about, he was talking about setting priorities, I think, for, you know, what are we going to teach? And of course it's going to be, it depends what you think is important. So the decision making needs to be based on, I think, as others have said in this panel as well, about giving each person, each group a voice. The students ask, as Lisa, you were saying, about asking them how they feel about the learning, about online learning, and how can we make that better for them, asking parents what they need in order to make the distance part work alongside the in-school part. So that's a very long answer, I think, to your question particularly about support. But I think that's really the sort of the key ideas about that we've included in this document.
Yes, I believe it's not easy to answer with one sentence. The topic is so broad and there are so many important things that need to be mentioned. Throughout the day, we have heard teaching is not an easy task. Now, in this COVID situation, even more roles have been added to the teaching. And Lilia, perhaps from the perspective of Portugal, you could share with us what you plan in autumn, what kind of support in the form of training do you plan to give to the teachers to be ready for these new roles that we are still not aware of, whether they will be the same as now or if they will change slightly in autumn?
Is not exactly 100% certain that we'll go back to a blended system of teaching, or if we just go back to the face-to-face lessons, because that depends a lot on how the pandemic will evolve. Anyway, of course, that as I've said, think all the actors, all the stakeholders in the educational process will see it with different eyes from now on. So of course that our school training centers will have a word to say in terms of CPD for our teachers. Of course, municipalities have also been a very important stakeholder in what in what equipment is concerned, especially for low-income families. And of course, the ministry is very attentive to the development of the situation so that measures can be taken accordingly. So I would say that also parents, as I've mentioned in my presentation, also have a very important role and have understood after these 3 or 4 months of distance learning that in fact their role is very, very important in what the education of their children is concerned.
Yes, thank you. And we have already mentioned that teachers needed to adapt the curricula to the new moment, to the new way of teaching. So Paivi, what would be your advice to the teachers? How to best prepare that they are fit to adapt curricula to any kind of extraordinary situation they find themselves in?
Once I had a nice discussion with a Finnish teacher, and she said, finally, I've understood the role of the new curriculum in Finland. And what she mentioned, it meant that now she had found the idea, the learning conception of our new curriculum, which was renewed in 2000. We took it into action in 2016. And a lot of emphasis is put on the key competencies, or the transversal competencies, as we call them in Finnish curriculum. So that's one thing to find the balance between the general competencies and the subject matters and the disciplines. So I think this is one thing that you have to know your curriculum well, and then to adapt it to the situation needed with students. So that's basically, and also to analyze quite deeply what is the learning conception about. If you say that learning happens in collaboration with other students, what does it mean in this virtual environment, how to support that, and so on.
And perhaps, Elvisa, you could add, how did you motivate your students? Because from the audience this morning came that it's not easy to motivate the students. Some of them who were very quiet in the classroom became very vivid in the online learning, and the ones who were very active got a bit lost. So all of them needed this individual approach. So can you share with us, how did you manage to achieve this?
Well, regardless of digital tools I used, I it's not the same to communicate with students face to face and in online class. So I often, especially with younger students, 5th graders, I often through our class chat ask them, do you understand? Do you need help? What do you need? Is this okay? And I try to maintain. I'm not friendly with my students, but I try to use friendly and some emoticons and some gifs and some stuff that is similar to them, and how to say, and make them laugh and make them comfortable in their role of being a student in online process. With 8th graders, I had to use many methods, like calling their class teacher if they didn't contact me online for a week. I had students who played some game for a week, and he told his mother that he's doing everything and everything is fine. And when I called his class teacher and I said to my colleague, he's not answering, he's not doing anything, and we called his mother, and we try to motivate our students. We try to give them what they need, but also we try to earn their respect. And I think that is most important, that students look at us as teachers who will help them and who will be there for them, not only to give them bad grades or something else, but to give them support and everything they need in that situation. And for me, this experience was very challenging, but very I don't know how to say, successful. I would use this word, successful.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I'm terribly sorry, but the time runs so quickly, and I believe that we would need at least half an hour more to discuss all the topics and themes, because they are so interesting. But before we finish, because another session needs to start, I would like to ask you all in one sentence to give the final suggestion, advice to the audience, what they should do and how they should prepare for the next school year. So what would be the key point, key message? So perhaps, Hannah, if you could summarize it in one sentence from the European perspective.
We'll give it a go. I think probably our message is more to the system. I mean, we're talking to everyone involved in school education, but if we want teachers and schools to be creative, to be imaginative, to respond to the needs of their students, the systems need to be flexible and they need to have that dialogue. We cannot have a situation again where everything depends on the final examination in June. We need that. We need to know from the start what the other creative, flexible options are for curricula, for assessment, for communicating well, for building communities. And so that will be so that really taking this opportunity in a positive way to build more flexibility into the system, but bring everybody even closer together through dialogue would be our main message.
Okay, Elvisa, from the perspective of a teacher.
From my perspective, I would advise my colleagues to take a rest and then to build their self-confidence and charge their batteries through this summer, and to start as a fresh teacher. Thank you.
Lilia?
I would say important is to engage teachers in reflective practices. That is really important because they need to know if what they're doing and how they're doing is responding to what is needed. Because a very important idea that I've heard in many webinars I've attended recently is that no student can be left behind. So they have to feel that in fact teachers care about them and what they're doing is because they want that they succeed.
And Paivi, since you're doing even your PhD research, what is worth learning in 2040? Perhaps you could give an advice for autumn.
Okay, I think quite often we speak about digital leap, don't we? Mm-hmm. And I think that this is not a question of digital leap, it's like a pedagogical leap to the digital age. That's what we have to take now. So they're just tools that, like Elvisa mentioned, that in hands of creative teachers, we can do whatever we want with these digital tools. So we have to keep, all the time we have to keep in mind what is learning and what is worth learning also. I think that's my message.
Thank you very much. It was really amazing having you, all of you, as panelists and presenters. I'm so sorry, but the time goes extremely quickly, and I hope that the audience has also received some food for thoughts so they can prepare further. So thank you very much once again. And now I would like to announce that there will soon start the new session, and that is the session on evolving roles of teachers and trainers in vet and adult learning, which will be moderated by my colleagues Nina Bojic and Vesna Angelic. So colleagues, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.